we're going to kick off our Saturday morning bright and early with a panel directed specifically to young lawyers. Many of you have probably thought about working in-house for a business at some point in your career. This panel will provide you invaluable insights into the day-to-day practice of being an in-house lawyer, from challenges they face to how you can set yourself up on a path to working in-house. Moderating our first panel is the Honorable Judge Ada Brown. Judge Brown was nominated in the Northern District of Texas by President Donald Trump and confirmed by the Senate in 2019. Before her appointment to the federal bench, she served in the state judiciary as a justice on the Fifth Court of Appeals of Texas and as a trial judge for the Dallas County Criminal District Court. She began her career as a prosecutor in the Dallas County District Attorney's Office and also spent several years in private practice focusing on commercial litigation. Please join me in welcoming the panel and Judge Brown.
Well, good morning, and thank you for everybody waking up so early. I have exciting news. This is going to be the most fun panel you're going to hear all weekend because these ladies are amazing. We had the most fun prep call, and you are in for a fun experience. So I'm going to let each lady introduce themselves.
Thank you so much. I'm Paloma Ahmadi. I'm the general counsel of a company called WorkWhile. It's a flex labor platform. We're a venture-backed technology company. And before I got to WorkWhile, I took a little bit of a meandering career path. So I started my career at Kirkland Ellis in DC. And after that, I met my husband. He's a Texan, so we moved to Texas. I joined AZA. And shortly thereafter, my former internship boss from Major League Baseball, who had firmly promised me that there were no openings and I should never plan on one, called me and said there was an opening. So I joined the legal team at the Commissioner's Office of Major League Baseball, which was my first foray in-house. After about 5 years of that, we decided to come back to Texas. I joined the San Antonio office of Haynes & Boone, and from there went in-house with another technology company called Brex. And after Brex, joined WorkWhile as the first general counsel. So not linear, doesn't look like a ladder, but I'm happy to talk more about that and to share more with all of y'all about the career paths that lead in-house.
Hi, everyone. My name is Caitlin Hawkins. I am the Chief Legal and Development Officer at SPS PoolCare. And SPS PoolCare is a private equity-backed roll-up of swimming pool maintenance companies. So that means essentially we buy your neighborhood pool guy. And, so I oversee the legal department, which is still just me, and the business development department. So that's the department that goes out and finds the deals, analyzes them, runs them through our models to see if they, how they fit. And then our integrations department, who integrates the new businesses that we buy in. And we've done about 170 deals over the last 3.5, 4 years. So lots of M&A. So my background is in M&A. I started out at Gibson Dunn in Dallas for about 5 or 6 years in the M&A department, and then went in-house for a company called Hennessy Funds, which is a publicly traded mutual fund. I went in-house there for about 4 years before I came to this role.
My name is Katie Jo Luningham. I'm the Director of Litigation Counsel for Sally Beauty Holdings. I am the newest to in-house life. I've been in that role for a little over a year. And in that role, I manage all of the litigation docket for Sally Beauty Corporate in the United States, and I'm technically responsible for Canada as well. So that has been certainly a learning curve. Obviously, people know the Sally Beauty retail stores, but we're also the largest distributor of salon-grade products in North America. So our docket stems from anything, could be real estate, could be IP, could be general litigation, a slip and fall in a store, all the way to a MDL products liability case. Prior to that, I am, as my title indicates, I'm a litigator by training. I actually started my career, I call myself a recovering higher ed lawyer. I started my career in the higher ed group at Hush Blackwell in Kansas City. I'm a native Kansan, but my husband is a native Texan, and I went to Baylor, so I think my honorary Texan status is pretty solid. But started there, practiced for 2.5 years, and that was defending colleges and universities was great preparation because it's a microcosm of the real world. So I did a wide variety of things. I then was in the inaugural clerk class for Judge Branch on the 11th Circuit, stayed in Atlanta, joined Alston & Byrd, practiced general litigation there for about 5 years before moving into this role.
The diversity of your paths, I think, is really interesting. How about we start with a conversation about how you got your first in-house job?
So I gave a little bit of a preview of this. My first in-house job was in Major League Baseball, and I got that job because they already knew me when they had an opening. And this has been true of every single in-house job that I have gotten, is that somebody already knew me before they made the opening. And I have never gotten an in-house job where I didn't know somebody or have an introduction to somebody there from somebody who knew and trusted me. So your professional network is how you find an in-house job. A lot of these jobs are not posted, or they're not posted timely, let's say. Like by the time they're posted, people are already being interviewed. So if you're just looking at job postings, I would say that is probably not the best way to look for an in-house job. When I, got the call from my former internship manager at Major League Baseball, the job was not posted. They already had multiple candidates coming in to interview. And I found out when I showed up that I was, I think, the third or fourth person they had interviewed for this job. But was very, very happy to have gotten the opportunity. And it was because I had worked there as an intern, had stayed in touch. They knew I was still practicing law. I sent emails to my former internship mentor periodically. He never wrote back, by the way. Like, I sent emails into the ether every 6 months for years. And it worked. Never doubt the power of an email into the ether. Even if somebody's too busy to write back to you, just having them know what you're up to, that you're still around, that you still think of them, like that there's some connection and interest is what will lead them back to you to remember, like, oh, I do know a junior litigator who might want to come work here. So I would say, in-house jobs come from people, and maintaining your network, even if they don't write back, is a very useful exercise.
And if I can tap in, one of the things I'm learning from what you said is just how important it is, if you're an intern or an extern, to absolutely stick the landing on whatever small project you're given, because it sounds like you were able to get your posse together. They already knew you. That's how you landed the job.
That's exactly right. It's who they know you and what they know about you. And if what they know about you is you always did really great work and were a pleasure to work with, like, you're in. That's money.
That's awesome.
So I have a little bit, because I have a corporate background training. I think the market is a little bit different for going in-house from a corporate background, M&A background, than it is from a litigation background. I'll say both of my in-house jobs I got from recruiter cold outreach. The first one I was actually considering, I was starting to look, but this recruiter didn't know that. I just happened to call me. I will say, though, that my first in-house job, I think my main road into it was that the general counsel who hired me had previously worked at the same law firm that I worked at, and so that was a nice connection that we shared, and I think that was part of the reason that she was, that I was hired. Was she kind of knew we had the same background, had the same training, and so she knew sort of that the expectation she would have, I would, hopefully be able to meet, having gone through the same path that she did 10 years. She was 10 years senior to me. My second in-house job, I got from a cold outreach from my current in-house job from cold outreach on LinkedIn from a recruiter. And I'm not an active LinkedIn person. I try a little harder now, but I was at the point was not. I was awake at 3:00 in the morning with my second child, and I'd reached the end of the internet while I was scrolling, and so I clicked over to LinkedIn, having reached the end of everything else, and coincidentally, this recruiter had messaged about 7 days before that, which was very lucky because there would have been a chance I wouldn't have seen it for months, and had pitched this role, and I read it and thought, that's the job I want, and a couple weeks later I had it. So.
Well, you're the first person I know who's gotten a job from LinkedIn, so I think that's great. No, I'm glad it does happen. I actually, I'm really glad that we did not talk about this before, but I had a completely different experience. And so I actually did get my job from a posting. I had decided that I did not, it was time at my law firm. I'm just going to be very transparent about this because I can, I did this so recently. I knew that I did not want to be a partner, and it was at the point in my law firm career where I needed to say that. And it takes a lot of trust in your firm and in the people that you work with that will be well received. But I knew that I either wanted to move into an of counsel role at the firm, which certainly was an option, or I wanted to leave the firm and do something different. So I had been keeping an eye on the market and then had sort of opened to my network, which was very helpful. And I did have a couple of interviews that came through sort of trusted people at the firm who were very helpful and supportive. But I had been keeping an eye on the market for jobs. I had a specific set of things that I wanted. I was very deliberate. I was not ad hoc applying to things. I knew that I wanted, it had to be in the DFW Metroplex because that's where we live. I wanted hybrid. I'm an extrovert. I wanted to be in the office a couple of days with people, but I also felt like it was very important in making this transition to be in the office so I could learn the business. And I remembered how valuable being a young lawyer and just learning from people around me was. So DFW, Metroplex, hybrid, and litigation. So I saw a job posting for the Sally Beauty job, and I thought, this is perfect. And so I applied, and that's how it worked. I went through the process, and that's how I got the job.
One thing I'll add to this conversation too is that, hopefully sometime in the next, I'm hoping sometime in the next year-ish, I will be hiring for associate general counsel role, and connections are super important for that. I think there was some luck involved in my past of having 2 cold outreach jobs that worked out quite well for me. But when I'm looking to hire, it's going to end up, it's very likely going to be connections based.
Is that in part because you rely upon the expertise of the people who are recommending?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay.
In-house jobs do reference checks.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they will call your references. It's not a formality. I know, people submit references with job applications and nobody ever gets a call.
Mm-hmm.
We call. Every in-house job I've ever had has called my references and had detailed conversations about, would you work with her again? How was her performance? And people back channel about you specifically because, like Judge Brown said, it's in-house. There's not an army of people. It's generally a much smaller team than you would have at a law firm, and they are counting on you to do your substantive area, that you own your area. And you have to know it, you have to be reliable, and you have to be somebody that they can count on. And it will be very visible if, it's a mishire. So I think, yes, we generally are pretty careful about that.
So how did you all describe yourselves? I don't want to make you sound like you're commercials, but pitching yourself in your best light to land these wonderful jobs. What goes into that? Looking back at your skill set and trying to figure out how do I highlight what I think will be most helpful to get this job.
Yeah. I mentioned in my introduction and talking a little bit about my path, sort of my role as a recovering higher education lawyer. When I was looking for jobs, litigation jobs in particular can be very few and far between. Typically, in order to justify having someone who runs litigation, it has to be a company that's big enough and has enough legal exposure or risk that they have a docket to be managed. Other companies have litigation that they want people to actually practice from inside their company. I manage outside litigation counsel, which means if we get sued, I hire attorneys, they handle the case. And knowing that from the job description, it was abundantly clear that having practiced general litigation was very helpful, but that there would be an additional variety of cases on that docket that I may or may not have practiced. And so I thought back on the different experiences that I'd had, and I worked to articulate how those really impacted the job that I would be doing. So although when I was working at Alston and Bird, I was doing really sophisticated data breach, class action, defense work, or I was doing some higher education work for some more sort of sophisticated colleges and universities. I had training when I was a young lawyer where I had done these different things of, general torts on campus, enough labor and employment work to be a little dangerous, and I should clarify, I have a counterpart who does all the employment work. I do not do that, but I had these different experiences that I could articulate that showed a breadth of my practice, that showed an understanding of the different areas that would likely come up in this job and how my resume specifically translated to that. The other thing that I stressed and that I want to encourage to this group is I had the opportunity to do a part-time secondment for a client while I was at Alston and Bird. And for those who aren't familiar, being seconded is essentially acting as sort of you're like a drop-in to the legal department. So you work for your law firm, but you're working for the client as like an assistant general counsel or something like that. So I had a part-time secondment for a year during COVID. It was remote, so it was a great way to kind of get integrated. And so I was able to articulate that I understood what it meant to not just work in a law firm, but to work in a business. Because, as Paloma mentioned, when legal teams are hiring, you want someone who can really learn the business quickly. And big law is very different from working in corporate life. And so showing any indication that you had spent time outside of the law firm, working in a business, translating policies to real people. My secondment was for an institution of higher education. I would be on calls with deans or professors, and they're asking, okay, I see this policy, but how do I implement that? Because, it's COVID, so we're updating things, having to be nimble and agile, and translate that to what it looks like in a day-to-day practice. That is the biggest piece of your role when you're in-house, and so they're always looking for someone who has either prior in-house experience or, if you've been in private practice, some insight and true understanding of what it means to work in a business. So those were the things that I stressed, the breadth of my experience and then also my secondment and time doing that.
Yeah, I think those are all really great points. And, I think part of what Katie Jo's speaking to and that I think is so important is do you remember in law school, or some of you may are still in law school, how you think about what it is that the professor's looking for before you turn in papers or before you do an exam, right? And so much of in-house, right, it's so much more varied than applying to law firms where, they're largely looking for the same thing if you're looking for practice groups across big law firms, right? For instance, so my first in-house job, I was, coming in as an associate general counsel to a general counsel that I knew had been, trained big law, and, that was doing a lot of, SEC filings, sort of board materials. So in that instance, what she's looking for, right, is someone to take some piece of the large pie of work that she has, to take it and do it well and own it, right? So being able to speak to, stepping up on deals that I had done, running portions of deals with, some limited partner oversight, that sort of thing was really important to emphasize, when I was interviewing for that role. On the other side of the coin, when I interviewed for my current role, it was, the first legal hire general counsel role, my first general counsel role. But it was a business that was trying to grow really quickly, right? I mean, the whole point of, these private equity roll-ups is you're going from really small to hopefully quite large very quickly over short amounts of time. And there isn't time for legal to be the one who stops things from happening, right? And so emphasizing that one of the reasons, and this is in fact actually true of me, is that one of the reasons that I really wanted to go in-house was that I felt like I had the sort of business sense to do it, and especially the business sense to take risks, knowing what the risks were, but to advise companies on ways that they could, mitigate risks, yes, but still do exactly what they wanted and still grow and for my company still grow as quickly as we wanted to grow. So I emphasized a lot, and I think there's a couple of my Gibbs and Dunn colleagues in the audience, of the like how I felt like on the spectrum of lawyers, which we're all a pretty risk-averse bunch, let's be fair, right? But on the spectrum of risk aversion, I think I'm not that risk-averse for a lawyer. Still probably in the very high percentiles for the average population, but for a lawyer, I'm not that risk-averse. I told a story that I feel like rang very well about how I consistently parked in a parking spot at Gibbs and Dunn that I was not supposed to park in because I had just done the risk-benefit analysis and decided that parking very close to the door was just more valuable for me than the teeny chance that someone would tow my car. And I did it for 5 years, and I never got my car towed. And so I told this story as and I told everyone at Gibbs and Dunn about this, and no one else parked in those parking spots because everyone was so risk averse that even though I told them I had never been caught, they still didn't want to do it. So I think that that kind of a thing in this case rang really true, right? It might not be the right story to tell. It was not the right story to tell for my first job. But for the job I have now,
Yes.
it was exactly what they wanted to hear, which was, I will manage your risks, I will make sure you're not making any missteps, but I am not going to stop the company from doing what we want to do. And I think that then led to, I now oversee actual business teams as opposed to just the legal, as opposed to just the legal department, because that sort of skill set was recognized as okay, she's willing to take some limited risks to make sure that we can grow like we want to.
And I want to underline what Caitlin just said, because this is such good advice. Talking about legal advice in terms of risk and growth. Risk and growth will resonate more with somebody who works in a company than talking about your substantive expertise. Your substantive expertise is table stakes, showing that how you can manage risk by understanding the company's risk appetite. And I'm on it, like Caitlin just said, her second in-house gig has a very different risk appetite than her first in-house gig. That's really important to understand. Not every company is highly risk averse. Some companies really, really are. And so, for example, there's in the sales process, it's super common that software companies will put potential customers under NDA. But when you send a customer an NDA, their lawyer will read it and get back to you in about a week. And so when I came to my current role, the first thing I said was, do we really share anything that sensitive? Is there anything in the sales deck that's not on our website? And if there's anything in the sales deck that's, super sensitive, then yes, you should please use an NDA for this customer. But if it's the standard deck that I know you're all using, you do not need an NDA, just go. And making that determination was really useful to the sales team, calibrated with our risk appetite, and enabled our sales team to unlock value deals faster. So talking about that process, it's not that I assessed the risk of, confidentiality protection, and I determined that none of these qualified as trade secrets, and none of none of that resonated with my team. But just saying you can just get to your demo faster because I don't think you need to do the thing that you were doing before. I also have a similar approach to redlining NDAs. I, in general, will not heavily redline an NDA because it's silly.
I totally agree.
And that, and that is not the risk posture of my company. We are a risk-on company. We want to take smart risks because our number one priority is to serve our platform users well and deliver value to our investors. And this is what we are trying to do. We're trying to grow really, really fast. And if I say that every salesperson has to wait a week while the customer thinks about our NDA, I am standing athwart that for no good reason. So I think, talking about your work in terms of risk management and being able to calibrate to the company that you're interviewing's risk appetite, ask about the risk appetite in interviews. That's a totally fair conversation to have. How do you think about risk? What are the biggest risks to manage in this business? How is that materialized for you? Is this a company that never wants to get sued, or are you okay getting sued? Some companies are fine getting sued. means the litigators have more fun.
Some companies are just gonna get sued.
Also this, there is no way to litigation-proof a retail business. If there are people walking around, something's gonna happen. And I think that there's, calibrating to that risk appetite and then talking about how you can unlock and unblock value and generation of value growth in the business are really powerful ways to learn how to talk about your skill set. And there is a way to talk about every single legal skill set in this way. So don't just say like, oh, but I do X, Y, my practice area is this. Like, no, every single one. If you haven't figured it out yet, start listening to your colleagues, start listening to partners, start listening to your clients, and you can find the language to talk about your skill set in a way that manages risk and unblocks value.
So I've got a question for you ladies. You are all very accomplished and incredibly bright. How do you pick jobs that have cultures and values when you're looking for a place that mesh with yours?
Dr. Phil had it right. When people show you who they are, believe them. Believe them.
Mm-hmm.
If you are sitting in an interview and you're like, gosh, this person seems like a real pain,
Mm-hmm.
they probably are.
Go ahead.
So just like factor that into your assessment. You know, if that's your future manager, you're going to spend a lot of time with that person.
Yeah.
And if you are, talking to a bunch of the people you'd be working closely with and you're like, gosh, this doesn't align with my values. I can't I don't, you're going to become the average of the people you spend the most time with. We spend a lot of time at work. And so if you're meeting these people and you're like, I want to be nothing like them,
Yeah.
you should probably not work there. Like, it's going to be really hard to work there. So when people show you who they are, believe them. The interview is the first date of life. Like, this is the best they're going to be. If you don't like them in the interview, you're never going to like them. So just take that data point.
No notes.
Yes, great advice for sure. Yeah.
I had a lawyer come have lunch with me and my externs and law clerks, and a very prominent attorney of faith. And one of the neatest things he talked to us about was he'd applied at a law firm, and immediately they asked him to do something against his moral code. And when he told them he wasn't comfortable, they said, well, you're not going to be much of a successful lawyer. And he started his own law firm, and you may have heard of him, Mark Lanier. I think he's doing pretty good. But I thought it was neat that what he did was set up a firm that aligned with his values. Yeah.
Yeah. And there is a way to, people are going to tell all kinds of horror stories about life in corporations where you can't admit that life begins at conception, or you can't be a person of faith, or you got to tuck in your cross so no one can see it. Don't live that way.
Yeah.
Being a lawyer is too hard to be also worried about if you're towing the right, slightly fictional line about your beliefs.
Yeah.
It's too hard. You're selling your judgment. You need your judgment to be clear. So get enough sleep, don't abuse substances, but there's, your judgment is ultimately what you bring to the table as a lawyer. And if you're so worried about accidentally saying that there's only two genders, you're probably not going to give the best advice in that context. And so just have that moment for yourself of here are my lines, here's what I'm okay with. And if you find a conflict, move on, because we all have the blessing of a law license. That means you can run your own business. If everything goes awfully, you have an alternative. Your BATNA here is go hang your shingle. And you can. And it might be tough, but you never have to work somewhere if you have a law license.
Yeah.
You can go work for yourself. There is always an alternative. And so don't ever sit there and say, I have no alternative. I must do this reprehensible thing. You don't have to. You don't.
And I think the other thing to add to this is that so many companies out there, there's, I think people who generally align with the Federalist Society, beliefs abuse, a lot of people in this room are in those companies. And they're just being a little quieter. And, but most of the time, you're talking about people who are out there trying to hire the best person for the job, make money. There's these other considerations, you read about them, but a lot of, they definitely exist. And, Paloma's advice is spot on when you encounter those sorts of situations. But don't be scared. A lot of times it won't come up at all, or most people will share your positions who you're around anyway. I've yet to encounter a lot of, super left-wing CFOs, for example. Most of the people out there running businesses are, pretty aligned. And, and I think just to add to that, I think one of the things that Federalist Society's been doing is sort of, pushing this a little bit more with in-house counsel networks and, trying to sort of play the long game on making sure there's a, sort of conservative presence in C-suites and boardrooms, which I think already exist, but just making sure that we know who those people are, and that sort of thing. So, don't be worried. You're not, a lot of the things you read about, do happen, but most of the time companies are just kind of operating on a, trying to make money, put their head down, trying to everyone do the best job, hire the best people, and
Yeah, they're scandalous outliers is why you read about them.
yes, exactly.
And I want to reiterate that point. A lot of times it doesn't even come up, but I also wanted to share my perspective because Sally Beauty is a creative company. It's a progressive company. Again, it's known for bright hair dye and hair color. So we have a lot of creatives. And I think, when we talk about values and the kind of place that you want to work, the people that I work with share my values in terms of family first and in terms of doing great work, but also work not being the priority in their life. So they may have different beliefs, different ideology, different politics, but we share core values in terms of civility, respect, hard work, having kind of the right priorities. So it is a good fit for me in the legal department. But the other thing that I think is so interesting and that bears kind of drilling down on is these companies are big. We have stores. Sally Beauty has stores across the entire United States, across Latin America, Canada, and Europe as well. But we have store associates. Part of the reason that we have such a respectful civil discourse, even in a company that's known for being kind of creative and out there, is because we recognize that we have store associates who work for our business, who hold views across every race, religion, political ideology, et cetera. And so when your business is built on having good, hardworking people in stores that may be in, rural Alabama or the middle of LA, you have to live out a corporate culture that makes room for and respects all of the store associates that are doing that hard work and that have differing views on stuff. So that I have really enjoyed getting to know more about that. And I think it's different than you might perceive a large corporation. But the people are what makes Sally Beauty successful. And so at the corporate level, they are very supportive of our store associates, and they may have very different views on things.
I love that. That's awesome.
So I've got another question for you ladies. When I look back on my career so far, I feel so super blessed to have had some amazing mentors who would whisper in my ear and say, do what you want, but here's my advice. And those mentors have come in all shapes, sizes, races, ages. Talk to me about whether mentorship from anyone has helped you along your path.
100%. My first in-house job came from a mentor. My second in-house job, I had a wonderful role model in our GC. I learned a lot about just smart in-house executive leadership from her. And the thing that I think, being a lawyer is an apprentice business. We have to learn this from people. Yeah. And so I think, finding those people who can teach you and help you figure it out is such a big part of why, I said, if you don't admire these people, don't go work for them. Right. Because, these are who you are learning how to do this. Yes, and you're going to spend a lot of time with them, and you're going to learn how to be an in-house lawyer from your first in-house colleagues. Because you didn't learn it in the law firm. So you're going to have to learn it from them. And so these people will be your mentors. Seek out mentors, I think, is my other advice. I think sometimes as younger lawyers, we can over-index on a fear of how to approach somebody. As a non-young lawyer now, I will tell you, we are always flattered to be asked. Even if we don't have time to respond, I've never received an email from a law student that I was like, oh, I can't believe they sent that. Never. That is never my reaction. Usually my reaction is just of intense guilt that I missed it and did not respond in a timely manner. And so I would say send the email, like reach out to people, reach out to your alumni network, reach out to the people who went ahead of you in the Federalist Society or other groups that you may be a part of, because we're always flattered to be asked. We're always happy to do a 20-minute Zoom or to have coffee and to share what we know and treat mentorship like a buffet. Not every mentor is going to have the exact right advice for your situation, but by having these people who you've developed a relationship with, who know you and know what you do and know a little bit about your work and have maybe worked someplace that you now want to work, you're going to be able to assemble the right guidance for yourself at each moment.
Yeah, and ask people who are your mentors who else they might be able to recommend you talk to, who might have a different insight, or who might have that missing piece that Paloma's referring to. I also have had several great mentors. The main partner that I worked for at Gibson Dunn, Jeff Chapman, was a really fantastic mentor for me. Even when I told him I wanted to leave the law firm, which was a tougher conversation, but he was immediately there for me to try to help me do what I really wanted to do, which was go in house, and has continued to do that for me. And I think now what's interesting, and I don't know, Paloma, if you've had this experience as well, but now that I'm in-house, I have, people who are mentors who are not lawyers, which is, really great perspective. And, the CEO of my company right now, he started out as like a branch manager trainee at like a pest control company and worked his way up to COO. And then he came over to our company as COO and now is CEO/COO. And just like a completely different perspective on employee issues. For instance, right, my company has a very blue collar workforce, right? Like we're out cleaning pools. That is the vast majority of the people in the company are out in your backyards cleaning pools. And sort of the perspective, and then have branch managers who are managing these people who are cleaning pools, and it's just such a different perspective than any sort of like really white collar job, right? I mean, my job before that was a mutual fund company, like super buttoned up. Like you have to have a different sort of outlook on things. You have to pay attention to different things that employees need and want, and challenges they're going to face, right? In addition, right, a totally different set of kind of problems that employees encounter at my current company, and having someone who has had that sort of perspective is it's completely different. Like it's sometimes he's now my I report directly to the CEO, and when I have something comes up and I talk to him and he'll have some perspective, I'm just like, I never would have thought of that, and so that's really fantastic. I think the other thing is just people who are seeking out mentors and who are willing to push you into areas that you don't feel completely comfortable in. Everyone will tell you this advice of push into areas that you don't feel comfortable in. Lawyers are just not built to do that a lot of times, right? We like the familiar. We like to stick with the things we know we're good at, right? And when you go in house, it's often very different. You are an expert suddenly, the expert in things that you would never have ever called yourself even remotely close to an expert at your law firm. I think when we had our prep call on this, we were joking about it, right? Like, at Gibson Dunn, we would have, there's an FDA issue on this call. There's a partner who worked with the FDA commissioner, and we're going to call her and find out the answer, right? And now Paloma said it on our prep call. Oh, you can spell bankruptcy? It's yours now, right? So
Yeah.
that you have to be willing to jump into that, and so having mentors who are happy to have to shepherd you through those challenges, and who have done that in their own careers is really valuable and vital.
Yeah, I would say when I was preparing to take on, this is my first general counsel role that I'm in right now. When I was preparing for this, I had a mentor who is a sort of, now she was a CEO, now she's like sits on boards. And I've made her my mentor. She didn't set out to be my mentor. She's my mentor. And I really leaned on her for like, how are my investors thinking about this? Like, if I say this, because when I interviewed for GC, I interviewed with the board of directors as well as with the fellow executives. And I said before my board interviews, I said, like, how does a board member like think about this? What kind of things what are the faux pas that general counsels commit in front of boards that I should avoid? And she gave me really, really good advice about like somebody from where she sits looking at somebody in my position. And it was incredibly good advice, but she's never been a lawyer. She sits on boards. She's been a CEO. She's now an investor also. And it's a totally different lens for your own skill set. Similarly, CFOs are going to give great advice. And if you're in-house, the CFO's team is going to be your best buddies. You're going to spend a lot of time together. And so finding CFOs who can mentor you is also really, really useful perspective. Also, one of my mentors is a chief people officer. She gives great advice, just like as a human.
Paloma doesn't know this, but I'm going to make her my mentor now. I think all that's great advice. The one other thing I would add, big fan of non-lawyer mentors. You should also find a lawyer mentor in your law firm who's not in your practice group. I was fortunate to my first office at Hutch Blackwell. I sat across from a young partner in the real estate group, and he walked into my office during my first week and he said, "Hey, welcome to the firm. You and I are never going to do work together. So if you have any stupid questions that you don't want to ask someone you report to, I'm happy to answer them." And he said, anything as simple as like, I don't know how to turn on my computer, but also substantive things like how to navigate the firm. And it was such a great gesture. It's one that I have emulated when I was at the law firm. But find someone who understands the firm, understands the dynamics, can help you sort of navigate those spaces, but that you don't report to, so that you feel, so that you develop a relationship where you can be candid and open and seek advice without worrying how that interplays. The other thing, you mentioned a tough conversation, telling your boss that you wanted to leave the law firm. And I mentioned that mine was not a challenging conversation. One of the things that you realize as you progress in big law is that pipeline gets so narrow so quickly. So if there are good associates who don't want to stay on partner track, the firm is happy to have that because it helps them plan and make decisions for those tracks later. The other thing is that they would love for you to go work somewhere and hire them. So your mileage may vary. It may be different at your law firm, but I did want to provide that perspective because I don't think raising your hand and saying, look, I don't want to be a partner in my life is not leading me in a way that makes it conducive to being a partner at a large law firm. I think I would like to shift to something different was a very good, supported, easy conversation at my firm. And that very well may be the case for many of you who are in large law firms who, would be happy to help me help you find a job in-house.
Not every lawyer is good at BD. The view that Katie Jo just talked about, this is a view held by lawyers who are good at BD, who know where cases come from, which is clients who know you. Not every lawyer has that kind of foresight. I had a friend who told her firm she was going in-house, and the head of her practice group got really mad at her. And I was like, man, he must not be very good at business development. Just like, where does he think cases come from? Not every lawyer has that. So Katie Jo's point about finding the people you can trust and finding the people who you know are going to have that view already. Like, watch how they react to other people leaving. Like, their behavior will tell you. If they're the person like arranging the farewell happy hour and being like, we're so glad for you, congratulations. Those are the people who you can trust with saying like, I'm not sure partners for me. Yeah. I think I'd like to try something else. Would you help me? Versus the ones who, come to your office and you're like, oh, I guess they couldn't hack it. They had to go in-house. Those are not the people who are going to be really happy to help you find your next step. Just like take the note, take the note.
And those people who said that to you, you can call them at 3:30 on a Friday and put some and have them do something later on in your career.
But this about find mentors who know you and who want good things for you, not just professionally, but as a person. My husband is a professor, so we are geographically, like he's a professor at TCU, we're staying in Fort Worth. Go Frogs, right? So when I was on the job market, I turned to mentors who understood and respected those geographical limitations, because the advice of, oh yeah, just be ready to pick up and move for whatever good litigation job comes your way was just not helpful advice for me. And so this is about finding mentors who know you and who care about who you are and what you value. And that will be much more helpful.
Well, I think we have just a few minutes left. Are there any questions from any wrap-up remarks from the lady? No?
We sure there are no questions? Nobody's got any questions?
Any questions? Anyone?
We answered everything. You guys are all ready to.
There we go, brave soul.
So y'all came from law firms and now you're in-house. What do y'all look for in hiring, let's say it's not an established relationship with the firm. You're looking for a new firm to handle something for you. What is it you look for?
Rates.
Rates really matter.
Yeah.
Okay.
We are looking for legal expertise in the subject area, but also the jurisdiction. We have cases that span, again, the country, the world. And there are lots of great lawyers out there. So it is flexibility on fee arrangements. It's new client discounts or volume discounts. It's, every legal department is rate sensitive. And the reason that I jumped in and said that is because when I was a lawyer, especially at a large law firm, it was not my job to worry about rates. That was the firm's job. Now that I'm in-house, it is my job to worry about rates. And so even if you're an associate, if you're trying to build those relationships, the law firm will work with you on that too. And then we see that, and it helps just better establish and engender that relationship as well.
Insurance coverage also matters. For the employment docket, if you are not a panel firm and it's a single plaintiff case, I'm probably not going to pick you.
Okay.
If this is, but even in other practice areas, insurance coverage, ability matters. Cyber is one that immediately jumps to mind. And certain sort of cases that are going to hit my GL, I would want to make sure that my insurer agrees that you're good to go. So if you are a firm that has a conflict with particular insurance companies, that's important to be aware of. Okay. And these exist. Like, talk to the partners. Like, these kinds of fights exist. There are certain firms and certain insurance companies that just will never deal together. So you should know if that's the situation that you're in. The other thing I will say is I tend to hire people, not firms. I want to see the person who will be handling my matter. If it is litigation, I do care about experience in the court that I'm in front of the judge that I'm before. If I'm dealing with a regulator, I need to know if you know that regulator. Not that if you know the substantive area, but if you know that regulator. Because relationships matter and credibility matters. And if you have very strong credibility in this particular court, I want to know that and I want to use that. But I'm hiring people, not firms. It's important that you have the resources to appropriately staff the case, but in terms of the leadership of a matter, it's the people, and I have never been more annoyed than when the partner who sold me the work disappeared from the matter. And I was left with an insufficiently supervised senior associate who had never been in that court, never been before that judge. That was not a good look, because I hire people, not firms.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The hiring people look like I'm less experienced than both of my co-panelists in hiring outside counsel, mostly because we are trying to keep corporate overhead as low as possible and legal expenditures as low as possible. And we don't have a ton of litigation and so we don't have big matters. We have some things that handle their insurance. But I think the hiring people is the right point here, especially I think when you're inside the law firm, you sort of think, oh, people just, are like, oh, that's a big law firm. They're good in this. They're highly ranked in this practice area. We'll pick up the phone and call. And I think that does happen sometimes. But being the person who might be the one making that pick up the phone and call, like I'm not going to feel super comfortable just like looking at like a chambers ranking and picking up a phone call, right? Like I want someone who worked with that person before, someone that I trust who can say that person is, that this partner or even this, senior or even junior associate is a great person to staff on this, right? When we have, hired outside counsel when we did, for instance, debt financing, and I did a lot of, I want you to find someone who's a really good mid-level associate that you can put on this, and you can not charge the partner rates because this isn't super complicated, but I want someone who will be really good and who'll be able to talk to me and pick up the phone when I call. And we got that, and it was, so smooth as a result.
Yeah, I actually interviewed the mid-level associate at the firm that I was I recently moved my corporate governance and fundraising work to a new firm, and I interviewed the mid-level for that reason, because I was like, this is the person I'm going to be talking to the most, so like I need to know that person. I will also say your clients are all talking to each other about you. We compare notes. There are in-house groups. We meet, we ask each other for who's good and why, and referrals come in the form of a name and specific comments about your billing practices, how efficient you are, whether you're a pleasure to work with, all of those things. Like there are, like just picture your clients have email chains and text chains and whatever, like saying like, I need someone for X in Florida, and there'll be a name and a phone number and some comments like they did my last, debt financing, and they were a pleasure to work with. They're very efficient billers, or like, this person knows everything but like watch the bill. That might be the feedback. So your clients are talking about you. I often will ask for referrals and ask for introductions from other in-house folks to try to find the person, if I don't already know someone, to try and like get to that person that I can meet and then maybe hire.
Yeah. Any last thoughts, ladies?
I have one thing, which is that I think when you go in-house, you're sort of closer to like what I would call the quote unquote real world than you are at big law firms. Like oftentimes, I practiced big law firm M&A. I really loved it. But like what you're seeing is this like teeny top echelon of what happens in the real world, in the world, right? You're seeing these giant deals that are super well staffed with really competent attorneys on both sides, really competent investment bankers, really, just teams of in-house attorneys that really know what they're doing and that, are willing to, pay big law firm rates for large bet the company transactions, large, PE acquisitions, that sort of thing. When you get in-house, and especially, now I'm like really kind of down there in the weeds, you're just seeing so much more of like, okay, your average person, the average company that we buy, for instance, do they read the purchase agreement? No. I've made the purchase agreement as short as possible because I realized very quickly no one read almost any of it. And, it doesn't matter that it was in there somewhere. It's not a got you moment. It's they didn't even realize they signed that. So like, holding them to it when your reputation as a business that's acquiring other businesses is on the line is so important that it doesn't really matter that they signed something. They didn't, like if they didn't realize they were signing it, like you're not going to get it. So like being super upfront is really important, just like, again, all of the like real life employee issues, real life like background check for employee issues, like, all of this stuff is just like very front and center in a way that it isn't when you're at a big law firm. And don't get me wrong, big law firms, fantastic training. Like I mean, would never ever take away the experience I had training at a big law firm for my current role. Like, best training you can have, but you are just remember that you are seeing this like very small piece of, kind of real life. You're not seeing the day-to-day operations of a company most of the time because most people are not willing to pay day-to-day operation or, pay big law firm rates to, do a board deck for a normal board meeting where they're not trying to buy something giant or sell something giant or have some massive litigation or, something like that. There's no reason to pay those kind of rates for that, sort of run-of-the-mill day-to-day operations of a company. So I think when you're going in-house, like being aware that like, look, there's a lot of like kind of boring, but like really important stuff that happens every day at your average company that you may not have had any experience or any visibility into prior to going in-house. So just keeping that mindset.
The thing I'll end with, we've talked a lot about the importance of networks, of mentors, all of that. The thing that I would say is pay it forward, be generous, be willing to leverage your network and your connections and to connect good people with other good people without expecting anything in return. My life, my career has been shaped in so many ways for people doing that for me, from undergrad to law school, my career, lawyers, non-lawyers. So if you embody that and practice that, it will help you in your career. And it takes nothing. It doesn't cost anything other than a couple of minutes for you to connect someone in a text chain or drop an email, but it may very well be the pivotal moment in their career or that connects them with someone who is an invaluable mentor. And so I think back on my life, on my career, and the people that I've met and the things that they have done for me, and I'm so appreciative of it, and I try and pay it forward. So more of a life tip than a professional one, but it'll serve you well in your career as well if you're willing to do it.
Kindness is never wasted, just never. That is such good advice. I almost don't want to say anything. Just leave you with that. Law is a hierarchical business in many ways, and we get used to evaluating each other based on the rankings of our firm or the rankings of our law school or the grade that we attained or the score that we got on the bar in Texas. And other states don't do that, by the way. I don't know if they still do. Is the UBE publishing the scores? Anyways, it's a hierarchical business, and we can sometimes fall into the trap of treating one another hierarchically. And there are smart lawyers working in very small law firms that you have never heard of. There are amazing in-house lawyers who don't have the same kind of credentials that would, land you a fancy clerkship or that would, help you get a job at a top 10 law firm. And just cultivating that sort of professional kindness, I would say, and respecting one another's skill sets and acumen, because good lawyering in-house looks very different. And the best, most effective document I've ever prepared as an in-house lawyer that generated the most financial benefit for my company was 4 bullet points in an email. This was not the magnum opus. It was never filed in court. It had no footnotes. There were no citations. And it, delivering value and being really good at it looks really different in-house. And so I would just say keep that respectfulness, keep that, that sort of professional respect for someone else's acumen, and just understand that being really good at it might look different than it did at your law firm. And yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any questions about in-house that you didn't want to raise your hand and ask. I'm happy to answer. It may take me a while. My emails usually start with, please forgive my delay in responding. But don't be shy, because I am happy to answer these questions. I know a lot of folks have them and might not want to raise their hand.
Would everybody help me thank these wonderful ladies about sharing their experiences?